There you go. Get into it. Do it. Dance. Yeah. It's our warm-up music. All right. Thank you, Paul. With our theme song, our buddy Paul Amelia. Thanks, man. All the way from Ireland. You know, gotta love those talented Irish people with OCD. So they're awesome. They're awesome. We've had Paul on the show in the past. He's talked about his OCD and his music and everything. So I love you, Paul. I got a message from Paul the other day, actually, too. Checking in. Lovely. Lisa, hi.
Hi, Patrick. Good to see you again.
What brings you here tonight, Lisa?
Oh, lots of reasons. But hi, everyone. I'm Lisa. I'm an OCD therapist, and I'm here tonight to support as an expert, also living with, I do live with OCD, and I live with depression and post-traumatic stress. I'm working on sharing my story more publicly, more to come on that. But yes, I am here. Also, representation matters.
Lisa, you said you live with OCD. Couldn't you just kick it out and tell it to stop? You know, you're going to not let it pay rent anymore and just remove it from the house? Or no? Is it a different? Yeah. No? Doesn't work?
Doesn't work that way.
Doesn't work that way? We tried. All right. Whenever we have people on, I always love to give them the opportunity to, you know, tell their story if they want. And then we'll get into a few questions here as well to discuss things. So we can kind of take it as you like. Do you want to get into some Q&A first? Do you want to tell everyone a little bit about you and what brought you to having OCD versus treating OCD, and how do you treat OCD having OCD and all those things? Yeah. It's a fascinating story. So,
yeah, and I thank you for the opportunity to have me on this show, Patrick.
Of course.
One of the things that's really important for me to be on this show is because, as I said before, representation matters. Growing up, and by the way, I may or may not look like I'm just out of college. If you think that, awesome, thank you. But I'm actually in my 40s, and as I was growing up, multiple things were happening. Mental health wasn't as widely or as accepted as it is today. With the extra layers of living within my culture. I'm Chinese, specifically Chinese American.
I was going to ask about the cultural aspect of that as well, too. Yes.
There's definitely layers to that. So just generally speaking, because I could talk for hours, apparently, generally speaking, OCD latches on to the things you care about, including your morals and your values. And for me, one of the layers of the values that I grew up with is values of within the Chinese culture and the values of the American culture, which can also clash. So that was that extra layer there. 20 years in and out of therapy, 20 years in the mental health field. I have learned a lot and grown a lot. My subtypes that I share out are contamination and perfectionism. I understand what it's like to freak out about poop. I know what it's like to freak out over, something was misaligned. I understand those things. I unfortunately did not ever receive ERP treatment from a mental health professional. I do my own ERP work. So for 20 years, and to no fault of the therapist necessarily, I had a lot of mental compulsions that I didn't have the insight to share earlier on. But now that I'm trained in the field, I can help people to shift where I used to struggle. I know how to ask for help now. I can identify things, and I do my own ERP work. Yeah, so that's a good starting point, I think.
So it's okay to ask for help, you're saying?
Absolutely. Please ask for help. And when you are, one of the things I shared out is that I've been, again, in and out of therapy for 20 years. And as a fellow therapist, I do have high standards. And also as perfectionism, I have high standards. It is okay when we seek out therapy if one, take that first step. Take that first step. because the worst thing you can do is suffer in silence, and I suffered for a very long time. And I'm here on the show to be brave enough to put this out there in the world, and this is one of my own exposures. So thank you for this opportunity.
Well, thanks for being here. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
And, please, if you have questions specifically for Lisa tonight too, that's always welcome. Always, always welcome. So we'll start with our first question. Hi, what is ERP for blasphemous thoughts? Also, since things get contaminated with blasphemy, I have to avoid or redo in order to stop. What should be the dialogue in my head? Well, so I've always loved the emotional contamination discussion, right? The idea that a thought can transfer onto a thing, and if I don't like the thought, now the thing is bad too, because the thing is associated with the bad thought. So now it's a bad thing because it's associated with a bad thought, right? And I would say, of course, that is a very made up thing. And here's why. Lisa, I could hand you a dollar bill, and you might say, thank you, Patrick, without knowing that I put a curse on that dollar bill when I gave it to you. And you go and you use that dollar bill and you buy a piece of gum and you love that gum and it's the greatest gum you've ever had in your life. And you just go on with your life content that you ate that gum and it was delicious and lovely and wonderful. And to you, that was a wonderful dollar bill. But to me, it was a cursed dollar bill.
Oh.
It was an evil, awful, horrible dollar bill. Would you at all know if I didn't tell you, Lisa, that I put a curse on that dollar bill?
I would never have known.
Okay. So what does this tell us? This tells us that we create these things in our head. And I don't mean that from a delusion point of view. Don't take it any other way other than this is one of the tricks of OCD that it does to you. And it tells you, oh, now that thing is bad. And just remember that bad things, you gotta stay away from those bad things, because look at that was when you have bad things around you, then they're a harbinger for other bad things to come. So you better make sure you're only around good things, and the best way, of course, to do that is to only think good thoughts. Never think a blasphemous thought. Now, of course, once you tell OCD not to think of something, guess what it thinks of? Right. It is, as I love to joke, my favorite, it is the pink elephant effect, right? The moment we tell someone not to think of a pink elephant, that's what we're going to think of. And the moment we tell ourselves not to think of a blasphemous thought, we're going to think of one. And now, boy, I remember working with someone once who was had an emotional contamination issue, and he felt that the hospital that I worked at was contaminated. And so when he came home, he would throw the clothes out that he wore at the hospital, and then he would walk naked into his house and put new clothes on because he didn't want to bring that contamination in. And for some reason, I can't remember exactly why, but I had to call him one night after program, and he answered the phone, and I said who I was, and he said, great, now I have to throw the phone out. Because that just me being on the phone and the electricity traveling through, he felt brought the contamination from the hospital into his home, and that he had to throw the phone out as well too. So OCD is amazingly creative in all of these things and figuring out ways for things to be bad. Right now, how would we do ERP to these types of things? Well, I don't need you to make any new thoughts. I just need you to be able to sit with whatever thoughts that you have and recognize that's all that they are. They really don't have to mean anything whatsoever. And your religion may tell you, but those are bad and awful, horrible things. But OCD takes advantage of that, right? So all I need you to do is to be able to stay with whatever's in your head and recognize, wait a minute, this is part of OCD, right? This doesn't have to be anything about me or my faith or what I believe or anything else. This is all OCD. Now, you're going to respond to that, yeah, but what if this time is a time that it really is me and not my OCD? Say, well, we'll never really know 100%, will we? But my God will know 100%, so therefore I have to always do the ritual to undo it, or else then I will go to hell. Well, does your God know what OCD is? Well, they are all powerful and all-knowing, so I guess so. Oh, okay. So your God's going to punish you for having OCD, then, is what you're telling us. That's a pretty punitive higher power there, I would say. I don't know about you, Lisa, but I would say that's kind of nasty if that's the case. So what's your take on that, Lisa?
I believe that any God that we believe in has grace. Anything that we are given in terms of struggles, we learn from, and it makes us a stronger person. And I also want to just add that fear, and whenever we have any fears, fear is definitely a construct of our minds. And once we recognize the fear is a construct of our minds, we can then deconstruct it.
Love it. Let's go on to our next one. Jay Javier says, hello, Dr. McGrath. Thanks for doing these Q&A. I'm still in therapy. Great. I noticed I went into a deep state of thinking, never a great thing, of course, when you have OCD, I'm sure, which led me to believe I was going to act on my thoughts, feelings, and urges. Did you ever have that happen, Lisa?
All day, every day.
Yeah. All day, every day. Okay. I have POCD. I felt like I was what my OCD wanted me to believe, gave into my thoughts. Next day, all of a sudden, I'm not in that deep thinking and can let go of thoughts easy. Why the 180? I can feel sometimes my OCD trying to reel me back in while I am in this state of non-deep thinking, something like that. Well, here's what I think. OCD wants to win, right? OCD doesn't want to give up. OCD doesn't want to go away. So OCD is going to do whatever it can to try to stick around. And our job is to not give it any food. Right? That stray cat keeps coming by because you keep putting a pan of salmon out every night. But if you start putting the salmon out, the cat's going to come by for a while. But eventually, it's going to be like, well, no more salmon there. So I guess I'm gonna go somewhere else and see if I can find some salmon somewhere else. So you have to make some decisions here. Are you going to be able to recognize that there are times all of us think deeply? There are times all of us don't think very deeply. But none of them have to be a cue for OCD or a pull for OCD. They could just mean you're just thinking, and that's all that it is. How about for you, Lisa?
Yeah, and the other thing I might want to add, depending on what your deep thinking stage is, if you're focusing the attention on the thoughts, really focusing on OCD, maybe in the times when you're not in the deep thinking state, you're focusing your attention elsewhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And if we're not thinking about the deep thoughts, what makes a bad thought? Maybe that's even a more general question. That's interesting. Is there actually such a thing as a bad thought, or does OCD define what a bad thought is? I don't think there's such a thing as a bad thought or an image or an urge. I think there's just thoughts and images or urges. But I think the filter of OCD tells us things are bad and that we shouldn't have them, and we're bad people if we do. And now we have to neutralize it, or else we're really bad people if that's the case. But, all right, let's take a look at the next one. See what we got. How do you increase your willingness to experience unpleasant emotions even when you're tired of being uncomfortable all the time? It's usually my feelings that get the better of me. I get that exposure is effective, but I find myself hoping for an eventual cure or some sort of biological intervention so that I don't have to work to surrender to uncertainty on a daily basis. Don't all of us have a surrender to uncertainty on a daily basis, though? I mean, Lisa, are you 100% guaranteed that your ceiling will not collapse on you during this talk?
There is no 100% certainty ever.
Okay. So should I provide you a biological intervention so that you will believe with 100% certainty that your ceiling will not collapse on you?
It's not going to help.
Okay. So if our entire life, every single piece of it, is actually wrapped in uncertainty, OCD is searching for something that doesn't exist because OCD wants certainty. OCD wants a 100% guarantee. Lisa, have you found one yet? All right. So you've told us you have OCD. How do you function with OCD not having certainty?
Acceptance. So what acceptance is about, one, accepting that there isn't 100% certainty. So when I get
But I
into
don't like that, Lisa. I don't like that. I want it. So give me a better answer than that.
well, I'm going to tell you to let it go.
Nice. Okay.
Let it go. And I say that with kindness and compassion, y'all. So
Of course.
I do. Letting it go. It's about really, one, we want to always talk about there's our thoughts, and then there's our behaviors, and then there are feelings. Yeah, we're going to be tired, and eventually we tire ourselves out, and we can also tire out OCD. What I mean by that is with acceptance, partly if you're swirling around in some of your feelings, look at and really sit with the distress in your body, recognizing the different feelings. Sometimes letting go is also about what we're storing in our heads and our perspectives of what we think we're storing in terms of maybe shame or guilt, resentment, those types of things from the past that we can not change. What we can influence is how we interpret and how we view the past, to let go of some of those challenging emotions that we're storing in our bodies and our hearts. And that's part of that cognitive triangle that we talk about. Our thoughts impact our behaviors, impacts our feelings. Our behaviors impact our feelings. In fact, it also impacts our thoughts. And it keeps going and going and going. And I found that part of our feelings that get attached to these things, not having a label for it sometimes, can also keep us in that swirl. So just naming what's going on, noticing what's happening in our brains, in our bodies, and sometimes our spirit, and finding that balance.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Balbazar, hello, Dr. McGrath. What does ERP look like for agnostic scrupulosity? Ooh, one of my favorite questions. I've mostly found things on religious and moral scrupulosity, but I feel they don't quite fit my theme. One of the things that my student Zach and I worked on last year was some articles specifically on this, and about how the fact that you don't have to believe that there is a higher power in order to have religious scrupulosity, because you could absolutely be agnostic or atheist and still worry, well, what if I'm wrong and maybe I should say a prayer anyway, and still do religious based rituals on the off chance that you might be wrong, even though you don't think you are, but what if you are, right? I've done this with people who are religious of a certain faith, but worry, just in case I have the wrong faith, I'm going to say prayers every night to other faiths too. So the difference between an atheist and someone who does that is they believe in one less God. And so therefore they're just doing one more ritual to pray to one more potential higher power in the off chance for them that there is something out there that though they don't believe it, but just to be sure, just in case. So it's still about seeking assurance, right? That in the off chance I'm wrong, that I'll be covered anyway. Okay? And so you want to work with people on their convictions that, hey, if you don't believe in something, that's fine. But do you have to do safety behaviors around that or not? Is that required? So. You can go to the International OCD Foundation website, and there's a section on religion and spirituality there, and you can find those articles, and there's all sorts of links for scrupulosity that are in there as well too, actually. Zenali says, advice on ERP for mental compulsions around harm OCD. I find it easier to implement ERP for compulsions that I do physically, but I don't know how to do ERP for compulsions that are thoughts. Lisa, anything on that you want to take?
Oh, one of the very first things is with mental compulsions, and we've been saying this, and we say this all the time, noticing it first and being able to label it. Mm-hmm. Mental noting. And without judgment, by the way. Oftentimes we judge, I did it again. Once you notice it, good for you for noticing it. Label it. Even if you're not sure what to label it, just label it. Label it first.
So what would you label it?
Could be anything. Worry thought, intrusive thought. Depending on the mental compulsion, it could be ruminating. I was definitely a ruminator. I used to spend hours at night mentally reviewing the past, replaying things in the past, sometimes even hypothesizing, meaning replacing some things in the past. What could I have changed that outcome in a certain way?
Mm-hmm.
And then I also ruminate about the future, which is reverse rumination, things that have yet to pass. So labeling it first, and then doing it may or may not even happen. And spending all that mental energy on those types of things. So labeling and may or may not happen. What if? Well, what if that? What if this? We can play that what if game all day long. And just noticing what we're doing, labeling it, accepting that there is no 100% certainty that this thing may or may not happen in the future, and also recognizing the things in the past, we can't change it, and to then let that go. And that's the acceptance piece.
Yeah. I'll only throw one potential caution on there, which is there's a subset of people who might use the labeling as a compulsion. So I've even moved people, I've started with that, and then I've moved people off even doing that and just acknowledging and move on, and not even having to spend the step of labeling something, so that that doesn't become a ritual for some folks. Not everybody, but I've seen it a few times. So I've tried to even take it one step beyond that, and moving to not even having to do that anymore too.
That's a good caution.
Yeah. Keep that in mind, everybody. It does seem easier, and I think for a lot of people, you just look at, well, if I touch this, then I don't touch this. So now if I think about it, don't think about it. But the moment I tell myself not to think about it, I think about it. So I've just created the thought. So I think you're absolutely right, Lisa. It's about acknowledging, but I just want people to acknowledge and move on. One of the things that I use as an example is, I have tinnitus, and I've heard the same sound for over 25 years. I don't like it, but it doesn't bother me anymore because I'm so used to it. And so you can live with something being there. You can acknowledge it and move on, and it doesn't have to interfere with your day, even if you don't like the thing being there, right? So be it a sound, be it an image, be it an urge, be it a thought, whatever it be, doesn't mean that it has to have an interference in your life whatsoever. A reminder to everyone, you're listening to the Wednesday night webinar by NOCD. NOCD, a downloadable app you get through Google Play or iOS. Please check us out. You can go to www.nocd.com also and check us out. We have teletherapists across all of the United States. We get more and more insurance coverage all the time. And we also work in Canada, and we work in the United Kingdom and Australia as well, too. Please come check us out. And hey, if you're a therapist looking for some work in the OCD world, we'd love to have you here, too, as well. So come give us a call. Kayla says, tell me what you think about ICBT. I still know nothing about it. I said that last week, and I haven't had a chance to do any more research on it this week, too. Lisa, anything? All right, moving on. I'm not going to talk about something I don't know about yet, really. I know that there's people out there looking at it and doing some work in it. I have not yet spent the time to investigate it yet, so there's nothing that I can say about it at this point. Brianna says, thank you for doing these. It really helps you understand ERP better in conjunction with your NOCD therapist. Woohoo! All right. Well, that's totally awesome. Thank you, Brianna. Chris says, a few weeks ago, I started Lexapro. I developed tinnitus. Oh, yeah, our friend. There we go. And you still have it. Yeah, Chris, I would refer that to your GP, your practitioner, to see about that. Sometimes tinnitus can just be, something that's there for a little while as a reaction to something, be it a chemical or a physical kind of experience. And sometimes it can be there forever. So it's hard to say. So I would work with a professional on that who would be able to kind of help you out in that area. Angela says, how do you tell the difference between religious scrupulosity and the true doctrinal issue? Issue that needs to be addressed. Been working on one for over a year. Can't seem to reach peace on the issue. Well, if you've been working on it for over a year, I'm going to go just roll the dice on scrupulosity on that one. That's probably what it is, right? I don't know about you, Lisa, but most people would go get a piece of advice from someone, and if there's a penance for it, you do the penance and then you move on. If you're spending a year on something and you keep on thinking about it and wondering about all these different caveats about it, boy, sure sounds like anything that OCD would want to do on something, but love your thoughts on that.
The what if. It's the what if, that one extra thing. Let it go.
Let it go.
Let it go.
That's all I know. I've never seen the movie actually, but I know that line. Yeah. So Angela, there's probably not a way without knowing what it is to help you tell the difference. There's no magical kind of that it's this if it's scrupulosity and it's this if it's true religion, because scrupulosity will try to mask onto doctrinal issues all the time, and things like tell you that maybe you committed the unpardonable sin, and it will say now you must have proof that you didn't do it, which of course you can't ever have proof that you did or didn't do. And you'll say, well, until I have proof, I have to kind of think that maybe I did it. And if you do, then you're just going to be miserable forever because it's unpardonable and there's not a thing you're going to be able to do about it. So you're just going to feel stuck. So, Angela, as difficult as this is, the goal is to recognize that you are not going to find an answer to that question because that question is not answerable. And the reason that question is not answerable is because it is an OCD question. And OCD questions never come up with an answer that OCD is satisfied with, which means OCD will always demand more from you instead of less. And you, Angela, will spend the rest of your life attempting to get an answer to the thing that you will never be able to answer. And I know that sounds sucky, and I'm sorry that it sounds sucky, but that's the way OCD works.
The thought that popped into my head just now was, it is what it is. Moving on.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. OCD hates that.
It does.
When you were working on that for yourself, Lisa, obviously at first your OCD was like, nope. What became like a difference for you or a motivator to the point where you got to where you finally kind of started to realize, I'm never going to give OCD anything it wants. It's never actually going to get there. What was there a turning point for you, or was it a process, or what do you think?
Yeah, as I was actually writing, reflecting about my story over the past 20 years, and it was, and it still is. When I go back to that place, I unfortunately was in a place where I didn't ask for help. So my story was more about the struggle bus that I call it. Being on that struggle bus for a long time, and
it's a crappy bus to ride on, by the way. No one should ride the struggle bus. That's all.
And thank you for that. And for me, unfortunately, I hit 2 debilitating episodes in the last 20 years. And it was those debilitating episodes. And when I say debilitating, the first time with OCD, with the contamination plus perfectionism plus depression plus all the additional stresses of college, what this debilitating episode looked like was a slow progression, and all of a sudden a burst of not being able to get out of bed, not wanting to, hygiene went out the window. It was just a really, really challenging time. And at some point I said, I can't suffer like this anymore. I don't want to live the rest of my life like this anymore, whatever this was. And at the time, it still didn't have a label. I didn't know it was OCD. And within my understanding at the time in college, I didn't even get help for the depression. Because again, at the time, 20 years ago, computers were around by then, but social media wasn't as rampant as it is today. And so unfortunately at that time, I had to get help. I couldn't stay in bed the entire time. I wanted to go back to school at some point. Cautionary tale.
Yeah. So a good lesson for everyone with OCD who thinks tomorrow will be the day that I'll get the answer. It's kind of an Alice in Wonderland experience. Oh, never. Are we going to have jam today? No, we never have jam today, but we're going to have jam tomorrow. Oh, okay, good. We'll have jam tomorrow. Jam tomorrow. Yeah. Well, no, you're not going to do it, because once tomorrow becomes today, we don't have jam today. We only have jam tomorrow. So that's what it's going to feel like. And one thing that I've talked about, Lisa, I'd love your opinion on this from a lived experience point of view. I say OCD isn't scary because it is predictable, and predictable things aren't very scary. But the trick that OCD plays on you is, even though it's predictable and you know exactly what it's going to do, that predictability comes with a caveat which says, but this time might be the actual time. Or, but what if this is the time that it actually doesn't follow all the rules that it's followed before, and this is the time that the bad thing actually happens? So shouldn't you just make sure and do the thing that you need to do this time in order to make sure everything's okay?
And that just keeps us in a loop.
It sucks, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. It does. It does.
Yeah.
I think what I would say on that, is just get off the merry-go-round.
Mm-hmm.
When you go on a merry-go-round, if you've ever been on a merry-go-round, you're just going to keep spinning and keep spinning and spinning. And at some point when you start recognizing, one, what you're living with, which is OCD, whether it's the mental compulsions, whether it's the physical acts that you're doing, at some point when you're recognizing it, you have the power to influence how you respond back.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a really key difference. It's that mindset. One of the other things that pops up into my mind is the most important minute of your life is the next minute. In this moment, you're noticing what's happening, and the next minute is that decision. What do you do next? And thinking about all the other minutes in your life or years from now, that next minute can change your life and change your direction.
Mm-hmm. I like that. The most important minute in your life is the next minute. Interesting. And do you want that minute to be truly experienced, or do you want that minute to be OCD's folly? Because OCD wants to own the next minute, and the minute after that, and the next 8,473 minutes after that as well. Right?
Mm-hmm. I call that the OCD's playground.
Yeah. Now I'm going to sing 525,600
minutes.
That OCD wants to run your life.
Oh, I'm going to have to rewrite that song now for that.
There you go. We're going to make an OCD 525,000. 525,600 obsessions. All right. Gaga POD says, hello. I've just right OCD, and 9 months ago I stopped doing a compulsion that involved crossing your eyes. You vowed you'd never do it, and seeing others cross their eyes gave you discomfort. Recently, that urge has returned due to a potential eye crossing, which gave me the urge to cross them fully. What could be the ERP for this scenario? Well, not crossing them and giving in to the compulsion is always a lovely thing, and being in the discomfort of that is exactly where we want to be, and allowing ourselves to recognize that. Let me pull it out of OCD for a moment, and let's go to our friends in the substance use community. Let's say that you have vowed not to drink again, and 6 months later you see a commercial for your favorite kind of alcohol. And suddenly the urge is there to drink that alcohol because you have been triggered by that commercial. What advice, Gaga POD, would you give to your friend who said to you, I've really got the urge to drink that alcohol now because I saw that ad? Would you say, drink the alcohol as an exposure? Or would you say, your best bet is to continue what you've done, which is to remain sober and not give back into the alcohol anymore? I think I know which way you'd go. I think you'd say, I don't be drinking that alcohol anymore, right? That's not what we're going to do. So, Gaga, I think that gives you your answer. I hope that helps. Michelle says, is rationalizing an irrational thought consideration ruminating? Sometimes I feel that I should just tell myself what I'm thinking is wrong. Lisa, what do you think of that?
Your thoughts are your thoughts. And what I'm hearing a little bit there is that there may be some judgment there, which might be a mental compulsion.
Mm-hmm.
Rationalizing could also be a mental compulsion, depending on what you're rationalizing.
Mm-hmm. Yes. There's where we have to be careful, right? The other thing is, and again, I'm not even a fan of the phrase irrational thoughts because I don't try to spend time judging if thoughts are rational or irrational. Thoughts are thoughts. I get some wacko thoughts that pop in my head once in a while. I'm not going to judge if they're rational or irrational. I just am like, well, that was way out there. And then I just go on with my life and I do what I do. I don't need to spend time deciding if it's a rational or irrational thought. So I'd even caution that a little bit as well, too, of the time spent attempting to label those things could be part of the folly of obsessive compulsive disorder as well. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Just something to watch out for. Can relationship OCD be towards a friend, siblings, etc.? Sure, why not? I mean, I don't see why relationship OCD couldn't take on any kind of relationship in the world. Absolutely. Should I physically stop my daughter's compulsions related to iPhone by removing it? Anonymous 100, hard to say. I don't know exactly what they're doing, and I would really consult with a therapist on that before kind of making that decision, because that might be a level 10 exposure versus maybe saying, I'm going to hold your iPhone while you use it or something. You know, there could be lots of kind of steps into ERP that you would do in that situation. So I can't give you just an absolute answer on that. Lisa, thoughts on that? Or
Same.
Okay. All right, let's see. We've got Yimpa. I have family members with whom I share many different opinions and worldviews. My compulsion is to correct them, prove that my opinions are better than theirs. Would ERP be effective in these situations? Sure. I mean, I don't know that that's necessarily an OCD experience, but I know that ERP can be a very effective treatment even outside of obsessive compulsive disorder as well, too. So you could be exposed to people who have differing opinions and reply to them, thank you for your opinion. I very much appreciate that. Right? And allow it just to be there without having to correct them. Now, boy, there's people who hate that idea, right? Mm-hmm. They don't like the idea that someone might think something different than them. Now, there's also potentially obsessive compulsive personality disorder, which does not involve actually having obsessions or compulsions. It's a horrible name for it. I don't know why they named it that. I just thought it was kind of dumb. But in OCPD, there is often a belief that I'm right and you're wrong. And, you know, everyone should just kind of believe me because no one else knows how to do things the right way. Only I do. And I have all the right thoughts. So in that situation, some ERP could be useful as well, too, similar to how I described it. But it doesn't have to be obsessive compulsive disorder in that kind of a situation. For suicidal ideation, what is the best medication and treatment for it? I would say I don't know that there's a best medication for it. I think medications are very dependent on people, and we know certain people with certain genetic aspects reply better to some meds than they do to others. So that really depends on you as a person. But we also know that behavioral activation is very helpful for people who are really depressed, and getting them up and active and moving and doing things again can be very helpful for them as well, too. If you're experiencing suicidal ideation, it's always great to reach out to a professional who can help you deal with that so that that doesn't have to be the focus of your life at this point. And what is the success rate for ERP? Over 85% of people who do ERP report some good results from ERP. So it's a highly effective form of treatment for sure. Laney says, my 16-year-old feels like her intrusive thoughts even intrude in her dreams. What can we do about that? Lisa, you want to take that at all? Or?
I'm laughing so hard right now because it's infused in my dreams too.
Okay, tell us about it.
I do think that, at least in my experience, and it also depends on what you interpret of your dreams. If you think they're just dreams because I watched a horrible movie with the gory stuff and then it seeped into my dreams. Those are just, carryovers. But if I'm ruminating about something, and depending on the content, it could seep into my dreams and I wake up really startled thinking it really happened in real life.
Mm-hmm.
So the goal is during the day, what's happening during the day, for me at least, what's happening during the day and before going to bed. Partly what I think helps, what helped me is shifting what I did right before bedtime as well. I've
Mm-hmm.
incorporated different practices, and I do want to say there's a blend for me. There's a blend of OCD, depression, and post traumatic stress. So just kind of take note of that. In my experience, what I do is I one shut down all the devices, literally shutting down all the devices for at least 30 minutes prior, because it's the thoughts that swirl around in the head,
Mm-hmm.
and in other spaces and places. And then we're activating our bodies in certain ways when we take the content right before our bedtime. And then even on our thoughts, there's that, maybe you can explain this better about the REM cycles. As I'm drifting away to bed, right beforehand, I like to do mindfulness practices. I will listen to certain type of motivational um, songs and motivational speeches. So to basically some gratitude practices that will
Mm-hmm.
float me into more of a positive and soothing dream state,
Mm-hmm.
ideally. So there's different things and different things for that.
Great. Thank you. Lisa, people are saying thank you for sharing with them. They appreciate your story. So,
Thanks for being here.
what's the best treatment for somatic OCD? ERP, CBT, or ACT, specifically blinking? I mean, I do ERP for those types of things. So I think people could find benefit in all of those. As long as you're doing cognitive behavioral based therapy, and the behavioral based therapy is the ERP. And I've always said this for ACT, if you're doing fantastic ERP, you're doing ACT. And if you're doing fantastic ACT, you're doing ERP. So I think that they're the fantastic versions of each other in many ways. So I think you'll find help through ACT or ERP. But you got to make sure you're doing it well and doing it right. Some thoughts recycle back. ERP puts a stop. Thoughts return, cycling. Will ERP keep making the anxious less important? That's the goal. But I want to say ERP isn't really designed to put a stop to thoughts. ERP is hopefully getting you to recognize that you don't need to pay so much attention to thoughts or be so overconsumed by thoughts. I've never once tried to stop somebody from having a thought. That's never been the goal ever in ERP, is that. The goal is to be like, oh, there it is. Okay, whatever. And move on and live my life. But Lisa, I'll throw in on that as well, too.
So many things. So I do this thing now where, and going back to like, you don't necessarily have to know everything with it because it can become a compulsion. But I do now, and if you happen to be a member that's watching that I work with, you'll notice sometimes in session I just do this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I reset because I'm acknowledging what happened and then I'm moving on.
Mm-hmm.
So many things resonate with me with these statements. Just acknowledging it and really moving on. It is what it is, all those statements. And I'll say things like, and I say to my husband all the time, I'm like, oh, so that happened. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Then moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah. Things happen, right? They absolutely
Mm-hmm.
do happen. And thoughts happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that'd be a fun t-shirt. Thoughts happen. Images happen. Urges happen. Do we have to feel anxious about them? Do they trigger our anxiety? Sure. I mean, if you think about it, the way that OCD is designed is it's right linked to that fight, flight, or freeze response. So it's going to be triggering to those type of things. But just because it is triggering doesn't mean that you have to react with fear. Right? You watch a horror film the 50th time, someone's getting, stabbed in the horror film the 50th time. It could still be triggering, but you experience no fear anymore. Why? Because you're used to it. You've habituated to it, right? So you can get there. And I think that goes into Allie's question next, which is OC fully treatable or is it just manageable? Bums me out to think it's only manageable. Lisa, I'd love you to discuss that a little bit of living a life with OCD.
Ooh, it bums me out? My eyes. Oh, it bums me. Yeah. You know what? Thank you for that question, Allie. It's it's a lifelong wellness journey. I kind of describe this as, it's just like any physical health condition. If you have diabetes and you need to every day test with the pin needle,
Mm-hmm.
you do it.
Mm-hmm.
If you have tinnitus, you're going to deal with it a certain way. If you have injured yourself, you're going to manage it a certain way. It may or may not come back. It's the same thing with OCD. It's and any mental health condition. It's lifelong wellness, and it's using the tools that you gain in life and through treatment, and you keep using those tools when you need to, and it pops back up. For me, I've struggled a very long time. Sometimes I still go on the struggle bus from time to time, but I'm on that struggle bus less often. I'm on the struggle bus for a shorter ride, and it's recognizing that it decreases over time, the struggles, and you're not alone in these things. And just knowing when to ask for help is a beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm.
The more you struggle and you don't ask for help, you're going to continue to go higher and higher on your struggle, and then it takes a longer time to possibly return back. So
Mm-hmm.
when you notice it happening, pull the tools out. And when you notice your tools aren't working, get help.
There you go.
Get help.
That's what you do. Mm-hmm. I like your idea, though, that there's so many things that we live with all the time. OCD can be another one of those things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Snacky says, I listened to you talk about don't try harder, try different, and learn so much. Thank you. Well, thank you, Snacky. I'm glad that you enjoyed it. It's one of my favorite talks to do. Trademark. Trademark. Uh, copyrighted feature of this broadcast. Yeah.
I really enjoyed that line too. Don't work harder. What
Don't
was the
try
line?
harder, try different. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I add that extra of don't work harder, work smarter.
There you go. Mm-hmm. Lindsay says, hello, ROCD Pearson here. I was asked to do a study for Columbia testing a medication that has shown incredible results on people with OCD called Celebrex. It helps with brain swelling. Heard of it? I mean, I've heard of Celebrex. I don't know anything about the study. So if there's people at Columbia doing a study on that, that's awesome. And we love to know that there's people still out there studying things. There's tons of things in the pipeline. Biohaven's even doing a drug for OCD as well too, now that they're looking at as well. So good stuff out there in the world. Gabrielle says, knowing you're a professional still managing OCD, oh, this is for you, is discouraging to me because I don't want to deal with this forever. I've been ERP for about a year now, doing better, but I still struggle. How do we help Gabrielle deal with the fact that she feels discouraged about this?
Well, one of the things I do want to share, and I don't know if I shared it earlier, is that I, unfortunately, in the 20 years that I've been in and out of treatment, I did not get help from an ERP professional because it did not. I learned about it eventually. I wasn't diagnosed with OCD either. So I want to share out that my 20 years of being in and out of therapy included back then, psychodynamic treatment, included CBT, and I've also received ketamine treatment. I do my ERP work now.
Good.
So I want to add that as a so that you know that, Gabrielle. So thank you for that.
But let me go back to what she's saying. Knowing
Mm-hmm.
you're a professional still managing OCD is discouraging because she doesn't want to deal with this forever. You've said you know that you're going to have this forever, but you've acknowledged that, and you're, I don't want to say okay with that, but you've come to terms with the fact that this is just going to be there. But because it's there doesn't mean that it has to interfere in your life. Is that correct? Am I right in my statement there?
Absolutely. Absolutely. What I'll say is along the way, you will struggle less over time. And what Patrick was saying earlier is that 85% of folks will see symptom relief. And the more you work at it every day, it's about practicing those skills, even just a little bit. And this is like a small example, and it doesn't interfere with my life necessarily. When I notice, and this is where we talk about like when you're noticing when you go over threshold, or at least that's how I call it. When you notice you're going over threshold, you notice your body's warning signs, right? And it's really about pulling out your tools before you go over a threshold If and what I'd like to say around this is that it's accepting that you live with what you live with, and that these feelings too will pass. It does. I struggle as a whole child, and now with my feelings, it happens, and my feelings are not as amplified anymore.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Thank you. Mick says contamination OCD is so severe I have been able to eat or use most things in my house. Doing ERP but very slow progress. Would you recommend inpatient care to get my health back? If it's interfering with your health, Mick, a residential treatment or a partial hospital, an intensive level could very well help to increase the progress that you're seeing to a level, especially if it is interfering with your health and you're not eating. You might find that having that more intensive therapy available to you could be the thing that helps you to move faster so that you get to be eating again. Because we also know this, that not eating means your brain isn't getting the nourishment that it needs, and the nourishment that the brain needs to function is a lot, right? It needs fats and it needs all sorts of things to be able to function correctly. So if you're not eating, you might be depriving your brain of some of those things, and therefore it might not be functioning at the highest level possible too, which could also then be interfering in your therapy as well. Linda says, what's my favorite ERP exercise? Oh, that's an interesting question. I think of the favorite one I ever did was I took someone to a train track and I had them stand behind me for 3.5 hours with their hands on my shoulder. I was a foot from the tracks of the train, and every time a train came by, I told them to push me into a train. I did that. 9 trains came by in 3.5 hours. I think that was my favorite ERP that I ever did. How about for you, Lisa?
I don't think I have one just yet.
No? Okay. Yeah, that one was really fun. Mm-hmm. Any tips or advice on how to manage existential OCD and thoughts about reality and those feelings of dissociation or feeling disconnected? I've been struggling so much recently with this. You know, one of the things that we do is you can do interoceptive exposures to those feelings, and you can create those kinds of sensations that you don't like bodily that you might feel when you're disconnected or dissociated. So doing things like hyperventilating for 5 minutes, staring at dots on the wall for 5 minutes, really letting your eyes kind of just out focus and everything can give you that feeling. There's even a YouTube that I've used for people to watch called Natural Hallucination that you can go on and watch too, and that creates kind of that interesting feeling as well. And allowing yourself not to be afraid of dissociation or the feelings of disconnected can be very helpful, along with then working with people on whatever their existential OCD is and the feelings that they have to figure out answers to certain questions. You know, in reality, many of these things have been debated for thousands of years, and there's still no agreed upon answer to them. And every new philosophical movement comes up with a new answer to some of these things, but it doesn't mean that anybody else agrees with them. So OCD says, well, there has to be an answer, and you have to find it, Ashley. It's up to you to find the answers. You, Ashley, will become the greatest philosopher in the history of all people kind, because you will have been the one who finally comes up with the meaning of life. And it isn't, it seems, just 42. Maybe it really is something beyond that, right? So, but that's just, again, a trick of OCD telling you that you are going to achieve something that the entire world is going to look at and go, oh, yes, Ashley was right. And Ashley, even if you did that and every single person in the world agreed with what you came up with, your OCD would say, yeah, but maybe that's still not quite right. Maybe there could be even a better answer than that. So even your OCD wouldn't accept that answer. You're getting some love, Lisa, out there from people, just so you know. So, yeah, lots of people happy. Anna says, I have social anxiety, and I think every time I meet new people, they won't like me. OCD makes me believe that. Well, social anxiety can make you believe that too. That doesn't have to be an OCD thing that leads you to that. I mean, that can be very much a part of social anxiety as well too. But you can do great ERP for social anxiety. One of the books that I often recommend for social anxiety is called Dying of Embarrassment. And in fact, the authors trained me to do what I do. So I think you'll find it to be very, very helpful and a good read. Ang says, what's the best treatment for just right OCD? Well, I love to do things just wrong and make mistakes. That's what I love to have people do purposely. How about for you, Lisa?
Same. Oh, that resonates with me. Yep.
Mm-hmm. My 14-year-old has OCD and is having a rough patch with friendship OCD. Her bestie just told her she doesn't want to be friends with her anymore. How does she deal with it? Well, that's unfortunate to hear. You know, I don't know. I wish I just wish I had a golden ticket answer for something like that. But I've seen this happen with friends and family members as well too, where there are people in our lives, unfortunately, who meet other folks or get influences from other people and decide not to be friends with us anymore. The best answer that I can think of is sadly kind of cliche, which is these things happen, right? I mean, it just I can't tell you why they happen, how. I can't give you an example. Well, here's the exact reason why this friend no longer wants to be around your daughter. 83% of it is because of this. 2% is, we don't know. We don't have that. We don't know what it is. So is it about trying to figure out why somebody isn't friends with us anymore? Is it more around, okay, now if that person isn't going to be in my life, what am I going to do to fill the void that leaves in my life? And how am I going to be able to live the life that I want to live and get the satisfaction that I want to live out of life without that person being here, instead of being woe is me and sad about the fact that that person isn't there anymore? There are people that I am not connected to anymore the way that I used to be. It is unfortunate. It is sad. But I've also figured it's best for me to move on and live my life and do what I can to make the best life that I possibly can. And if those people have not chosen to be in my life the way that I had hoped that they would be in my life, or the way they used to be in my life, that's on them, not on me. Lisa, we're getting to the 3-minute mark here. So I'm going to do a little bit, and then I'm going to hand it over to you for some final thoughts, okay, to share with the audience. So collect those while I go over this. Thank you once again, everyone, for listening to the Wednesday night webinar with us here at NOCD. NOCD, a downloadable app you can get through iOS or the Android Super Google store there. And you can check us out at NOCD.com. We do teletherapy all across the USA, and we do it in Canada and Australia and the United Kingdom as well, too. Please reach out to us at NOCD.com to set up a free 15-minute call with us, where we'll be able to see if we can help you and set you up with one of our well-trained NOCD therapists to work with you on OCD. One such as Lisa right here, who's been with us all night. Thank you for joining us, Lisa, and thank you for sharing your story as well, too. And, I always love people to give a little message of hope at the end here. So what is it that you want to let everybody else who's listening know about you and living with OCD and your work that you do and where you go from here?
Yeah. And again, thank you for the opportunity, because this is an actual exposure for me. Being so public about this, it's an exposure. It's confronting the fears. I would say for anyone who's listening and not sure of getting help or support, just do it. Just do it. You have a free phone call. Call NOCD. It's a free phone call. Have your questions answered. You're probably swirling around in your head. For those of you who are getting help, beautiful. Thank you for being brave. Thank you for continuing to be vulnerable and putting your trust into NOCD. And for anyone else listening, I'd like to say one of the things I really love about NOCD, and keep in mind, I'm a perfectionist. One of the things I love about NOCD is that we are a huge community here in 4 countries and across the US. It's a beautiful place to be a part of, and you can get that support. Visit the My Journey section, visit in the comments section, and there's a lot of help and support in the NOCD app and in the community.
Awesome. Lisa, thank you so much for chatting. We do appreciate having you here tonight with us. Thank you all for joining once again. We will be back again next Wednesday, continuing our Wednesday night webinars. And thanks also to Paul Melia, our theme song writer, as we let him take us out of here tonight. Be well, everyone. Be nice to yourself, and be nicer to yourself than your OCD is to you. It's always a good way to be. So, all right, everybody. Talk to you soon.